yeah, I don't know. It's just a really big, um, just discrepancy. I mean, the other argument that is always brought up is that it's not a gun issue, it's a mental health issue. Which I love when people say, because it's just so hypocritical that in August of this year we had you know 49 Republicans trying to take away mental health coverage for 16 million Americans or whatever. Like it's just hilarious to me that what it shows to me is that they just don't see it as a problem, right? If they're willing to show, okay, well, guns, the solution isn't guns, it's mental health, and then they don't do anything about mental health, they don't care about school shootings. You can't be a pro-safety candidate at that point. You just can't, and that goes for anyone. That goes for any member of the House, any member of the Senate, the President of the United States, any member of state or local government. If you simultaneously hold the views that like we shouldn't have more tight regulations on guns, and then go and vote against healthcare reform that would make mental health coverage accessible to these people, you just don't care. I think that's really, really blatant. And then of
I think
course,
that's a great point, Dominic.
yeah,
And I think honestly, it just shows that how defensive basically people that are against gun control are. They just kind of throw these arguments that are convenient for them at the time without really starting to think about where their arguments fail. And I think that's one of the major things that I have against gun control is really you pull up most arguments against it, and you can't. There's no legitimacy in any argument other than an argument where one says, "Hey, I like guns. I enjoy them. I go hunting every weekend, or I go to the gun range with my family, and I enjoy it." That's the only actual argument I've heard as for why we should keep our guns. Because any other argument that has been made as to why people should be allowed to have guns in today's age isn't valid.
right, exactly. And to be clear, we're not talking about taking everybody's guns.
No, we're not.
Yeah, like we're talking about marginal restrictions, very reasonable. We're living in the
Very.
21st century. People who talk about their Second Amendment rights, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison never would have possibly conceived that the muskets they were using in those days would be the equivalent of the legislation they were writing. The equivalent would be automatic rifles with bump stocks in the 21st century. It just doesn't exist.
No, and beyond that, the Second Amendment, people always love to paraphrase it as the right to bear arms. But they failed to read the first half of the amendment, which is it's for a militia. That's the purpose of it. Guess what? Do we want to, if we had to raise an army today against the United States government, if we wanted to overthrow the government, we would be, what would we have? We have a couple handguns, maybe some semi-assault rifles against the government that has nuclear weapons, drones. Are you kidding me? Like it's in today's world, it's not logical.
Yeah, and I've actually argued with people about this before, and they will literally, there's so much cognitive dissonance that they will literally argue that a civilian army would be able to overthrow our government. Like, dog.
In what way?
Like, do you realize that our military, not only, like, let's, like, taking apart, the fact that they have training, and we've got military strategy and intelligence and all that, like, packed into the military, just the pure dollar amount that goes into the United States military. We have a larger military than what, the next 26 countries combined? You really think some Texans with some automatic rifles are really going to be able to do anything about this? Like, no, dude. And then,
No.
like, yeah, it's just ridiculous. And not to mention, like, a lot of these school shootings aren't even, like, even if you're really worried about, like, the government becoming oppressive and wanting to, like, have a militia to overthrow them, these school shootings don't have to, school shootings especially, don't have to be done with automatic rifles. I mean, it would make it a lot easier if they got an automatic rifle, but, dad's pistol that he keeps in a lockbox under his bed, that's not overthrowing our government, dude. Like,
I mean,
background checks solve this problem and still leave open the possibility of raising a militia. Like, it's just, there's a disconnect.
I think the initial reaction to when they hear gun control is, oh, they're trying to take away my guns. We're not trying to take away your guns. We're trying to regulate it to make sure that guns aren't as accessible as they are today, and to make common sense things reality. Like what I said earlier, bump stocks. Even the NRA itself agreed that there should be something done about it, and yet nothing has been done. I don't know if that's what that comes down to. I don't know if it's people in the House are just afraid to even just like deter any of their constituents who might have guns. I just don't know. But I just think it's ridiculous how something as simple as bump stocks that everyone agrees. Even I've talked to gun owners about this before. Gun owners say I think it's ridiculous that bump stocks are accessible today. How something just that simple cannot be like executed. I don't know.
And I just thought of this. This is a really, really, really interesting parallel that just exposes so much hypocrisy to me. Think of the voter ID debate, okay, in places like North Carolina. Idiots who believe that voter IDs are fine, right, to solve the non-existent problem of voter fraud, of which there's like a 0.000001% voter fraud rate in the United States. Because why would you commit voter fraud to get one extra vote at the possibility of going to prison for life? It just doesn't make sense, right? We don't have a problem with voter fraud. So what do these people say when they're arguing against the Supreme Court that ruled that when in places like North Carolina, they asked for specific racial breakdowns of data and they shut down DMVs that could give out the voter licenses in those places specifically targeted towards African Americans? What did these people say? Well, couldn't these black people just have driven to other places? Couldn't these, it's not impossible, right? And then, well, a reasonable person would say, well, yeah, but you're just decreasing the opportunity of these people to obtain them. So obviously, based on racial discrimination, you're decreasing the amount of people who are allowed to vote. But then these same people, they turn around in the gun control debate, and when somebody says something like, well, I want to just regulate bump stocks, or I want to I want increased background checks, increased stringentness in background checks at gun shows or something. Then these people turn around and they're like, whoa, you're taking my guns. You are taking, well, it's like, no, I'm just actually trying to make it harder, decrease the amount of guns. Like they'll go completely 180 other direction. Whereas before, policy that's like targeted, not specifically targeted, like letter of the law to do something is can never be interpreted in another way. On the gun debate, policy that is specifically targeted to reduce something suddenly goes to the extreme, and they fail to look at anything with any type of critical lens at all. I just find that really, really hypocritical. That it just, no matter what they want, it suits their narrative, whichever way it goes. Do you see what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's going back to the point I said earlier about how basically they come up with any argument that suits them at the time without failing to really realize the consequences of that argument.
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of brought that up with the whole mental illness thing earlier, and I think you bring it up here again. Like politicians nowadays, I think the problem is that they're career politicians. All they really care about at the end of the day is, all right, am I going to be able to get reelected next year and keep my job and keep my paycheck, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And whatever they can do to make sure that they can appease their constituents and to make sure that they don't look awful and what sort of like they'll say whatever argument that's going to help them at that time, without like there's obviously some exceptions. There's some people that out there, that some congressmen, congresswomen, and senators that truly care about their constituents and are actually trying to make a difference. But I think for the most part, what the incentive in today's House and today's Senate is basically to keep your job and keep your paycheck going.
Absolutely. And I mean, this ties in. Why do you think President Trump didn't tweet after the school shooting in Kentucky about it? But, possible terrorism erupts in New York City, and he's the first to call for, tighter vetting for immigrants, right? It's because of the NRA. It's because, he has those loyalties, not just to the NRA, to other politicians who are in the NRA's pocket. And it's really sad that it just precludes us from getting any meaningful dialogue going on the situation. Like I would love to have a conversation with somebody talking about like what the best regulation would be. One that like is the least limiting to people's personal liberties while also protecting us the most. I think that would be a really interesting conversation, but there's nobody who's willing to have that conversation.
No, they're not, because the NRA has funded over $60 million to Congress to ensure that they have them in their back pocket. And any sort of mention of gun control in Congress will any of those constituents that have been paid off by the NRA will instantly turn their heads and not even listen.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really sad, because there are some, like we've been talking, there are some reasonable things. We're not trying to infringe on anybody's liberties to have a gun, to go hunting during the weekend with their family or whatever, but something that, hey, this could truly make a difference into the amount of school shootings we see, or the amount of mass shootings that we see outside of the schools.
Yeah.
Like semi-automatic assault rifles. What the hell do you need one for? Like, what argument is there against gun control that you would need a semi-automatic assault rifle? Are you going to defend yourself with a semi-automatic assault rifle? What are you going to be walking across the street and you're going to get mugged when you're carrying an assault rifle with you? I don't think so. It's ridiculous. Like, think about just how much time it'll take to take one out, put your clip in it, load it up, and then kill someone. It's unreasonable to think an assault rifle will protect you in any sort of case. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't understand it either.